Thanks. So my name is Alysabeth Alexander. I am the San Francisco County COPE, which is the Committee on Political Education, tri-chair. There's three of us for San Francisco County for SEIU 1021. So maybe I blended the last panel because all I've been doing with my time is dealing with the San Francisco County COPE, our county budget and city budget. I myself am a nonprofit worker. I work in the Tenderloin at a project called Tenderloin Housing Clinic. I'm a family advocate in the Tenderloin for Latino families. Most folks don't think of the Tenderloin as a Latino neighborhood, but 20% of our the population of the Tenderloin is Latino. So who's SEIU 1021? We go from San Mateo County all the way to all the way west, east, west, and all the way north. So we're a gigantic union, over 55,000 members. We are county and city workers, so we're CalWorks eligibility workers, we're child care providers, we're librarians, civilians in your police and fire department, we're nonprofit workers, we're Head Start workers, we're museum workers like the Exploratorium, we are public health care workers, we're nurses, we're case managers, we're hospital workers, we're 911 workers. So that's who SEIU 1021 represents. And the reason that we're against 1A is because for two reasons. There's the structure which limits the kinds of programs that we work for permanently. It's a permanent solution for a temporary budget crisis. So I think the heart of this question is why are we in this budget crisis right now? And the Republicans want us to believe that it's because we're spending way too much money on social services. And the rest of us know that there's a global crisis that happened for a lot of different reasons, having very little to do with the social services that really keep our communities afloat. And the other part of this is in terms of the structure of this program is it actually doesn't address the state crisis that we've had, the economic crisis that our state has had for years. Every year, California is wondering what the heck we're going to do. It's a terrible crisis. It doesn't address the heart of the issue. In fact, the Department of Finance predicts that even with these spending caps and with the monies attached to these, that we will still have a budget shortfall. So it actually doesn't address a lot of the concerns that many of us have about whether or not we're going to have funding for the programs. It doesn't address Prop 13. It doesn't address the 2/3 vote in the state legislature, and it also doesn't address the 2/3 vote that we need to pass taxes in the state. And so that's kind of the first reason is that structurally we don't think it makes any sense. We're in a temporary budget crisis, and why are we going to propose permanent solutions, permanent budget caps? The second is that we're multi-issue people. Our kids, our godchildren, our neighbors, go to public schools. We rely on the public school system, clearly, right? We also, we rely on the library structure, the public health care structure. We all somehow, as not as individuals, but as our larger communities, rely on all the services holistically that California provides. And we should not use fear to compel us into the fear of losing the education system. California's education system is terrible. It's awful. We need to invest in that. But we shouldn't use the fear to motivate us to be voting ourselves into these budget caps. So if 1A passes, it will extend the tax. That's now the taxes that are permitted for 2 years to 4 years. So we have these taxes for 2 years. That's a significant amount of time. It's enough time for us to rethink Prop 13. It's enough time for us to rethink the 2/3 votes at the legislature and the 2/3 votes to pass taxes. So I don't think there's as much urgency as is being created in order to pass 1A. The second is that the baseline that can be used to estimate the budget caps is not necessary. It could be an average of the last 10 years, or it could be 2008 and 2009, which is a terrible budget year that can be estimated after all the terrible budget cuts. And then that can be what's considered the anticipated revenue that comes in. So the budget would then be structured based on anticipated revenue coming in coming in, and you can use the previous year as an estimate. Well, if you're using the previous year as an estimate, then we're using the lowest possible year to estimate our spending caps, and then anything that comes in above that goes right into the rainy day fund. And there's severe limitations as to what can be used, the rainy day fund can be used for. It can only be used for two things. It can be used for capital improvements or to pay off bond debt. It cannot be used, there's severe limitations. So there's two rainy day funds, right? There's one for education, and this is where it's like education or not. And that's why that's why it's a sticky situation, and that's why the situation is set up to divide us. Because it's much easier to access the money that's going into the school's rainy day fund than it is for everything else. So are you pro-education or are you pro-education and everything else, right? So it's a sticky situation. But we're permanent. In order to repeal these caps, you need a 2/3 vote every time to repeal the caps. It's almost impossible to get a 2/3 vote, right? So, but it's only 50% plus 1 to get it passed. So we're getting ourselves, we're already in a hole. We'll be digging ourselves deeper and then just staying there because it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to undo this once we're in here. And that's why the tyranny of the minority is able to hold us to this very difficult situation. So I want to talk a little bit about the revenue spending, or the 3% requirement from the budget that goes into the rainy day fund. My understanding is that is actually different, not in years of budget surplus, but all years, even in budget shortfall years, 3% of the general fund is required to go into the rainy day funds. So even in a year like this, we would be required to be putting money into a rainy day fund. When we're not in a rainy day, we're in a tsunami. And so to have that kind of requirement is just feeding more and more and more, or is not feeding, but is starving our services, would starve our services more and more and more, because we are putting all this money into a rainy day fund, cutting the general fund, limiting what we can use the general fund for, and then when we are able to access the rainy day fund, it's only for capital improvements, one-time expenditures, and for bond payoffs. So it's like this endless cycle of starving the beast, right? Of pulling back everything that our state invests in. And then, let's see. One of the important pieces about the general fund spending is that the caps are not tied to need; they're tied to population change. So there is some, like, the slightest bit of wiggle room in these caps, right? There's a consumer price index, and then there's population change. So one example of how this formula doesn't work is with seniors. So as a population ages, the funding for programs doesn't change. It only changes when the overall population of the state changes. So as families flee California and the Californians that stay here continue to age, programs are not being invested in according to the needs of the population. It's kind of a flat rate and a flat kind of equation that things are that things are being estimated as. I think that's it. Okay. Well, I was going to say, I think I can stop there, and then you can respond, and maybe we can take some questions.